All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the webinar of today. Hope you're having a lovely afternoon. This week, our school is running webinars instead of face-to-face lessons due to the unusual caused by the coronavirus. So in this webinars will be slightly different from our classroom lessons where students speak and do activities. But in this webinars, I will be mostly speaking and explaining things. I will highly recommend you to have a pen and paper ready so you can take some notes. That could be quite useful. If you have any questions or any doubts about something, or if you think I have missed something, please don't hesitate to type it down in the comment section below. All right, so today we are going to start with our first activity on free time and hobbies. All right. Okay, so for those of you who don't know me, my name is Annika. I'm a teacher at Mayas Mervilli. So we are live from our school today. So, well, let's get started with our activity, free time and hobbies. So today we're going to talk about your favorite hobbies, likes and dislikes, some hobbies that you enjoy doing and some which you don't. And we're going to talk about asking questions related to the hobbies. So there can be different types of free time activities. There are some listed here on your left. One of the activities could be watch movies, right? So when you watch movie or football, notice the use of the verb watch. Right. Do you watch movies or do you watch football? In my free time, I love watching movies. What about you? So if you want to share about your own free time activities, please write it in the comment section. I'm curious about what you like to do in your free time. Some people like to play sports. If you notice the verb play, so if you talk about any sport involving competition, such as tennis, football, cricket, where there are usually two sides to a match, you say play that sport. But if you talk about sports in general, you do sports. So in general, do sports. Or play sports. You can also specifically say play football, play tennis, and so on. What about you? Do you play any sport? Do you do any sport? Feel free to share. In my free time, I do not do any sport, but occasionally I do love to go running. Right. Play can also be used for computer games. So you have anything involving some competition, you can say play. So play computer games. Do you enjoy playing computer games? When I was younger, I used to play computer games, but not anymore. Right. Photography. So do you like to take photos in your free time? Nowadays, it's really common to take photos in your camera or even on your cell phone and post it on Instagram or share it with your friends. Do you like to do that? Do you like to take photos? Let's talk about the next activity here, go out with friends. I love going out with friends in my free time. What about you? So if you go out with friends, in general, you go to a restaurant or probably to have a walk in a park or even down at the near the center. So which of these do you like doing? I definitely love going out with friends. You can also have you can also go swimming. Right, so we're having a comment from Renata here. She prefers to do crosswords and Sudoku. That's a really nice free time activity. So I'm curious if you do crosswords in English. Right, so that's a great free time activity, crossword. I recommend doing it in English if you haven't tried already. Let's talk about go swimming. So notice the form of verb here. So when you talk about an activity you do outside your house and it involves movement, you use the verb go and the gerund of the verb. For example, go swimming, go shopping, go running, and so on. So you have to use the form go plus verb ing. Free time movement activities. Okay, so I don't particularly enjoy going swimming, but I occasionally do it in summer. What about you? Do you enjoy going swimming, or do you enjoy going shopping? Let's talk about our last activity, travel. Traveling is a great free time activity. If you have a longer break from work or if you have a long weekend, visiting a new city is always fun. Right? Do you like traveling? Now, moving on. So let's ask and answer questions about free time. Very often we ask questions with do you. When you ask about anything in the present simple, we use do you. Now, do you is used for closed questions. These are special questions which have only two possible answers, yes or no, right? Or maximum three. It's okay. So if you talk about an opinion, you can either say yes, no, or it's okay. So do you like doing a particular activity? Let's talk about it. Do you like watching movies? Right? I definitely love watching movies in my free time. Since I am learning, I'm trying to improve on my Italian. I sometimes like to watch movies in Italian to learn more words. What about you? Do you watch movies or do you watch English movies? I'm curious to know, so let me know. And let's talk about the verb like. Hello? Hopefully you can hear me. For anyone who's online, if you can hear me, please mention it in the comment section. Okay, well, it should be okay now. If you're having problems hearing me or seeing the screen, please mention it down, right? Hopefully you can hear me, right? Okay, so let's continue. We were talking about asking questions. If you ask a closed question about someone's opinion, you have only 3 options, or most of the time 2 options. You can say yes, no, or it's okay. So do you like, right, thank you, Renata. So it's good to know things are fine now. So if I ask you, do you like watching movies? You can either say, yes, I like watching movies. No, I don't like watching movies, or it's okay. Right. So a short answer could also be, yes, I do. It could be, no, I don't. But if you want to go ahead and give some details, you say, yes, I like, and the verb, followed by the verb. Now, the verbs like and love are interesting because the verb following these, the verbs following like and love are usually in the gerund form or in the infinitive form. So you can either say, I like watching movies, or you could say, I like to watch movies, whichever you prefer. What about you? Do you like watching movies? And what type of movies do you watch? And do you ever watch movies in English? I'm curious. Let me know. Let's talk about other free time activities. Do you like playing sports? Or do you like playing some specific sports? I definitely do not like playing any particular sport, but I do enjoy going running once in a while. What about you? If you play any sports, please feel free to mention. Let's talk about playing computer games. Do you like playing computer games? I do not like playing computer games. I usually don't play it, but when I was younger, I used to play computer games. Let's talk about traveling. Do you like traveling? Well, I love traveling. However, I travel very rarely, like usually once every year. But in general, I love traveling. Okay. Let's talk more about your hobbies. What's your favorite hobby? So we talked about different activities. So usually you could have more than one hobby. In my free time, I usually like reading. I like writing, and I like sewing, right? Sewing might be a new word for you. This means when you use a thread and a needle to make clothes, right? You sew. Let me write that for you. I like sewing in my free time. So notice the verb form here, like with gerund or infinitive. You can also say, I like to sew in my free time. Do you like sewing or do you like doing other things in your free time? So among my three hobbies, my favorite is, I have to say, reading. I enjoy reading in my free time. What's your favorite hobby? Favorite is something that you like the most. Favorite. Let me write it down. So my favorite hobby is reading. What's yours? Let's ask more questions. So Renata also likes reading just like me. So let's talk more about it. When? What's the complete question for when? When do you like reading? Okay, so very often when you form questions, you use do you. You need the auxiliary. When do you like reading? I definitely like reading every day, at least once a day. Sometimes it depends on how much free time I have, but I try to read at least a little bit every day. What about you? Can you write it? Can you write down how often you like doing your favorite hobby? Could be any other things. I definitely do not sew every day. I would have to say once every week or once every 2 weeks. I would spend time sewing. If I have to talk about writing, I normally write short stories, and I practice writing normally once a week, but sometimes a lot of time goes by and I don't write anything at all. So it really depends. So Hinata says, my favorite writer is Isabel Allende. I like reading before sleeping. That's wonderful, Renata. So before sleeping is definitely very relaxing to read a book. Right, so she's very similar to me and reads every day. So who do you do your favorite hobby with? So reading is something you cannot do with somebody else. So you can't really say who you do it with. So notice the question form with who. Who do you do your hobby with? One thing to notice here is that the preposition is at the end. With is at the end and not the beginning. Just like you would say, where are you from? So the preposition is at the end. So I would I would read on my own, and I would write on my own as well. I also like sewing on my own, right? So my free time activities are usually done on my own, but I like going out with friends as well. So if I go out to a restaurant, or if I take a walk outside in the center or at the park, I would do it with my friends. What about you? Who do you do your favorite hobby or hobbies with? Where do you do it? Our next question is, where do you do it? I definitely like reading at home, especially on a rainy day, with a cup of tea. I enjoy reading on my own in a quiet place. And I also enjoy writing on my own in a quiet place, usually at my home. What about you? Where do you enjoy doing your hobby? So if you like sports or if you like to go running, I imagine you would want to go in a park or somewhere near your house. Okay. Let's talk more about hobbies. So far, we were talking about ourselves. We used I as the subject. Let's use other people as the subject. What do your friends do in their free time? Let's talk about your friends, or let's talk about your best friend. My best friend loves traveling in her free time. She has been to many countries and she loves traveling. What about your friends? Notice that when you use the third person singular, your verb changes to plural. For example, my friend loves traveling and not love traveling. How many family members can you remember? So we talked about friends. Now let's talk about family members. For example, sister. Let's try to remember other family members. What could be other, what is the word for the word for the son of your parents? So the opposite of sister. The word would be brother. Brother. Right, so you have, in my family, I do not have any brother. I have a sister. She is older than me. I have my mother and I have my father. So if you have a partner, you can either have a girlfriend or a wife, or you can have a husband. Wife is the female version, and husband is male. Okay, so let's talk about your family members' free time activity. So what does your sister do in her free time, for example? My sister likes listening to music in her free time. My sister likes listening to music. What about your family? Your sister, your mother, your father, or your partner? What do they enjoy listening to in their free time? Okay, so feel free to share anytime. Now, moving on, let's talk about challenge questions. Which hobbies are dangerous? Dangerous things are not safe. They may be harmful or cause problems, right? Could cause health problems or create emergencies. Dangerous. Which hobbies are dangerous? In my opinion, some extreme sports can be dangerous. For example, rock climbing can be dangerous. Rock climbing is when you go up, climb up a mountain with a lot of rocks around you. Rock climbing. Do you do any dangerous hobbies? Let me know. Which hobbies are safe? So, in my opinion, hobbies that involve staying at home or hobbies that do not involve use of any machineries are safe to do. Do you agree with me, or do you think some other types of hobbies are safe as well? Which hobbies are cheap? Now, cheap is something that doesn't cost money. It doesn't cost a lot of money. Cheap. So, in your opinion, which hobbies are cheap? I think hobbies that don't require buying a lot of materials are cheap. Among my hobbies, the cheapest would be writing. All you need is a pen and paper, and you can write. So it's a very cheap hobby. Books are cheap as well. I think books are also, reading is also a cheap hobby, but sewing is not a cheap hobby. My hobby of sewing involves buying a lot of materials, buying a machine for sewing. So it is not a cheap hobby, but an expensive hobby. So that brings us to our last question. Which hobbies are expensive? In my opinion, sewing is an expensive hobby. Other expensive hobbies would be some extreme sports, skydiving or parachuting could also involve a lot of spending of a lot of money spending. So Renata says here, playing cards can be expensive. Yes, you are right. So a lot of people play cards or poker and they lose a lot of money. So good thinking, Renata. Now, other than that, I could also think of playing cards that doesn't involve money, just for fun with friends over dinner. That could be a cheap hobby. But when you're betting money, you could lose some. Okay. So that's all we can talk about free time activities. Now we're going to talk about the opposite. We're going to talk about jobs, the time when you don't have free time, but things you have to do as an obligation. So we're going to talk about present simple, a little bit of grammar there. We're going to talk about daily routine. Okay, things you do every day is your daily routine. And we're going to practice asking and answering questions in present simple. So moving on. On the left, there's a list of different jobs. And on the right, you can see some photos that match with these professions. Let's try and match them. Right, so playing cards can be cheap if you don't play money. That's right, I agree with you. Playing cards and not play cards. Okay. So when you use any verb, you change it to gerund. Right. Hi, Patricia. Thank you for writing. So when you are playing cards, when you use a verb as a noun, always mention it with an ing, a gerund form. So moving on, let's talk about the profession of these people listed here. What can you see in the first photo? Can you guess the profession of this person? So she is the person who reports the news, can be probably in front of a camera, or she could be the person who writes the news in a newspaper. So she is a journalist. Journalist. Okay, it's a long word there, so don't be afraid to repeat and pronounce it clearly. Journalist. Let's look at the second profession. So as you can see, he works with a lot of clothes behind him. As you can see, there are some dresses hanging. He has a tape measure around his neck. So he works with clothes and fashion. So he is a designer. He is a designer. Now there are different types of designers. There could be fashion designers, interior designers. There could be different types of them. And let's look at the third photo. The woman in a suit holding the telephone. She answers phone calls. She helps helps people in an office. Helps answer emails. So what do you think her job is? She is a receptionist. She's a receptionist. Let's look at the next photo. We can see someone with a blue outfit. She works in a hospital and takes care of people who are unwell, right? People who are sick. So sick means people who are not physically well. S-I-C-K. Unwell or sick. Very good, Patricia. So I'm getting your responses a little later than when you write, so I'm going to give you some more time. So we are talking about the woman in blue, the bottom left picture. So she's a nurse. Very good, Patricia. This is a nurse. So at this, I think being a nurse is a difficult job, but very satisfying because you get to help people, right? Let's look at the next photo. You can see a camera in his hands, and to take photos and probably publish it in newspaper or publish it in some articles. So his job is, of course, photographer. Photographer. So it might be difficult to pronounce here. It's a long word. There are 4 syllables. Photographer. So the second syllable is pronounced more clearly than the others. Photographer. Let's talk about the last profession, police officer. All right, so police officer. Any questions so far? Please feel free to ask. Okay. So if you don't have any questions, I have a question for you. What do you think is the most difficult job? In your opinion, what's the most difficult job? You can talk about the jobs listed here in this slide or any other jobs that you can think of. Right. Moving on. Let's talk about verbs involving these professions. Thank you, Livia, over there. Okay, so the first person on the in the photo, journalist, what does she do? Right? Can you select the correct verb that are listed on the left? Right. So thank you. Very good, Patricia, police officer. So we have a delay here today because of the connection. So I'm getting your responses a little bit later than usual. So I apologize if I'm reading your comments a bit late. So what does a journalist do? A journalist writes. Okay, so she either writes or she reports the news. Let's talk about designer. What does a designer do? Does he talk on the phone? Well, in the picture, he is talking on the phone, but in general, what is his main task? So he works in an office. Okay, he works in an office. Do you work in an office, or do you have a flexible location? Let's talk about a receptionist. What does she do? She talks on the phone, right? So very good, Patricia. She talks on the phone. What does a nurse do? A nurse works in a hospital, right? A nurse works in a hospital. So very busy period for a nurse at the moment in the hospitals. Photographers. What does a photographer do? He takes photos, right? Notice the verb here, takes photos. I hear many students make a mistake and say make or do photo, but it's not correct. You take photos. A police officer wears a uniform. To wear means to, when you have something on you, an item of clothing, you wear that. For example, I am wearing a blue cardigan, and I'm wearing a blue shirt. Okay, so a police officer wears a uniform. All right. What's his job, right? Let's talk about a specific job here. Okay, good job, guys. Take photos, wears a uniform. Okay, so let's talk about the job of this person that you can see on the slide. He is a chef. So if he was speaking to you, he would say, I am a chef. I work in a restaurant. I wear a uniform. I work from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. and I do not travel for work. Okay. So if he was speaking to you, if he were speaking to you, he would say these things. But if I am speaking about this person, I would use the third person singular. So what would I say? He is a chef, or he's a chef. Normally we contract the verb to be. Right. What about you? Please feel free to share share about your jobs, right? As for me, I am a teacher, right? Let's talk about the second sentence. I work in a restaurant. So what would be the sentence in third person singular? He works in a restaurant, right? Again, the verb becomes plural when you use the third person singular. I wear a uniform becomes he wears a uniform. So let's talk about yourself. Do you work in an office? Do you work in a restaurant? Or do you work in a school like myself? Feel free to share in the comments. He wears, the chef in the photo wears a uniform. I do not wear a uniform. I can wear casual or casual smart clothes. What about you? Do you have to wear specific clothes at work, or do you have to wear formal clothing? Do you have to wear uniform? Let me know. Okay. I work from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. So the chef works from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. I do not travel for work. Then the third person singular would be he doesn't travel for work. Okay. So do you travel for work? I definitely do not travel for work. I normally work from school. Although many of my friends have to travel for work to different cities or different countries. Right. Let me know about yourself. Okay. So let's talk about specifics in your job. Do you do the following things as listed? Do you use a computer for work? For me, I definitely have to use computers during my lessons, during face-to-face lessons, as well as online lessons. What about you? Do you use a computer? Do you work in an office? I do not work in an office. I work in a school and sometimes in companies, right? But I do not work in an office. Do you wear a suit to work? Now, suit. What is a suit? A suit is a type of formal clothing. The one you can see in the photo with the woman wearing a black suit. That's what a suit is. I do not have to wear a suit at work. And okay, do you wear a uniform? I do not have to wear a uniform, but jobs like someone who's a nurse may have to wear a uniform. And sometimes police officers have to wear uniforms. Okay, so yes, thank you, Livia, for the comment. Nowadays, it is compulsory most of the time, right? Not only is, it is compulsory. So do you have to wear a uniform? Feel free to share. Talk on the phone. Do you talk on the phone when you are at work? I do not have to talk on the phone. I normally teach face-to-face, but in some occasions, I have to teach over videos, but I do not have to talk on the phone. Travel for work. I do not travel for work either. I am based always in Milan. Okay. Let's talk about more professions. In this photo, you can see someone with a pen and paper. She has some pictures in the background drawn by children. So she is most probably a teacher, most probably a primary school teacher. So what does she do? She teaches kids. So the correct sentence would be she teaches kids. Okay, so notice the verb form here should be plural. Location. So where does she work? Does she work in an office? No, she doesn't. She works in a school, right? Patrizia says she is teaching, right? So she is teaching at the moment. You're right, you're correct. But if you want to talk about what she does in general, you can say she teaches. For example, I can say I am teaching at the moment. I am teaching online at the moment. But I could say normally I teach face-to-face, right? So it's a slight difference there. Let's talk about location. Where does she teach? Does she teach in an office? No, she doesn't. She teaches at school, or she works in a school. Okay, she works in a school. Get up, what does it mean? So when you getting up means in the morning when you get out of bed, you get up. Okay, so since she is a teacher for kids, I imagine her getting up really early to go to school on time. Right. In a school, yes. In a school is correct. She works in a school. And Right, she gets up. Right, at school is also correct. Very good question, Livio. She work at school or in a school? Okay, they're both correct. All right, that's a good question. Let's talk about the verb work, from, and to. So this is the structure used to indicate the time. So I imagine her working from 9 o'clock until 4 o'clock, perhaps, right? So I personally work at different times on different days, having different schedule. But as a primary school teacher, I think she works from 9 to 4 p.m. Do you agree with me? Feel free to share. Go home. What time do you think she goes home? I think she goes home between 4 to 5 p.m. when the schools close, right? Okay. All right, let's talk about your job. So what do you do? If you are you a journalist? Are you a teacher like me, or are you a nurse? Let me know. Okay. Do you work in an office? Do you work in a school or a hospital? So that's about location here. So the time you get up, the times. Right. So Livia says, I think around 1 p.m. is enough. Right. Well, yeah, if it's a primary school, you're probably right. She would be done at 1 p.m. So for little children, you finish school quite early. All right. So, all right. So she goes home at 1 p.m., let's say. Let's talk about third person questions. Previously, we looked at questions with first person or second person. Do you do something? Do you like watching movies? Do you like playing sports and so on? This time you're going to use the third person. In this case, you do not say do anymore, but does. Does Diane work in a school? Notice that the verb is no longer in the plural form because there is does. And for you, again, you have two possible answers. Yes, she does, or no, she doesn't. Okay. Let's talk about this guy. Does Wayne play football? Yes, he does. But if I say, does Wayne teach English? You would say, no, he doesn't. Most probably he doesn't. Let's look at more examples. This is Mary in the photo. So if I say, does Mary work in a hospital? All right, she could either be a nurse or a doctor, more likely a doctor. So if I ask, does Mary work in a hospital? Yes, she does. But if I ask, does Mary work in a school? No, she doesn't. Okay, so any questions so far? If you do have any questions, do not hesitate to write it down below. Okay. Let's look at more third-person questions here. Does Paul cook in a restaurant? So if you look at the first photo here, this is Paul. Does he work in a restaurant? No, he doesn't. Where does he work? He probably works in an office, right? The second photo, does he work in a hospital? No, he definitely doesn't. He works in as a football player or a footballer. Okay, so the third picture is that of a teacher. So does he work in a school? Yes, he does. But if I were to say, does he work in a stadium? No, he doesn't. Okay, so let's practice some more. What's the profession of the next person? In the second row, first photo, she's a singer, right? A singer. If I were to ask, does she teach in a school? Your answer would be, no, she doesn't. She is a singer. Okay, so I think the rest of the photos should be okay, so we are going to move forward. Okay, yes, good job. Yes, footballer, well done. You can either say footballer or football player, is the same thing. So Joel here says, no, he doesn't. Perfect spelling, well done. So what's his or her job? Normally when you talk about a job, you say I am, and then you write the article, a or an. A is for words with the consonants, with the first letter as a consonant, or if the word starts with a vowel, you would say an. So I'm an engineer. I'm an electrician, but I am a teacher. Okay, so what about you? I'm curious about your job, so please feel free to put it down. I work in, so when you work in a specific location, you work in that place. I work in a school. What about you? Do you work in a bar? Do you work in somewhere else? Let's talk about the next sentence here. I get up at. So when you talk about time, notice the preposition here, use at. I get up at 7 o'clock. Normally, I get up at 7 o'clock, but if I have some work to do, I get up at 6 o'clock. What about you? Are you an early bird or do you get up late? I work from, again, you talk about time here. I work from early morning to 1 p.m., for example. So my schedule is different on different days, so I don't have specific time to mention. But what about you? Do you have a fixed hour when you work? Or does your schedule vary day to day, just like mine? Right, so let's talk more about it. Eat lunch at. So when do you eat lunch? I eat lunch usually at 1 o'clock. I usually eat lunch at 1 o'clock. I read, right, I read newspapers. I read newspapers for to keep myself updated. Right, I'd like to be an early bird, right. Thank you for the comments. Right, so yeah, it's definitely good to be an early bird. And let's talk about I do not. So I do not I do not get up too late, for example. What about you? What is something you do not do at work? Okay, so these are some things to discuss. So we are running out of time. We just have 3 minutes left. So we're going to quickly review a few things we talked about. So at the beginning of the lesson, we talked about some hobbies, right? When you enjoy movies or films, the verb you use is watch, right? To watch a movie, to watch football, to watch something on TV. We talked about some free time activities that you do. Right, so Joel here says, I read books and newspaper articles. Very good. I I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your names wrong. But yes, so newspapers and articles, that's definitely a very good habit. Reading books is great. So we were talking about a free time activity that involves movement. We often use the verb go with the gerund form. For example, I go swimming or I go running in my free time. Right. So we also talked about what a photographer does. A photographer takes photos, right? So notice the verb there is to take photos. Let's talk about some profession that we mentioned. The person who works in a hospital and helps out the doctor, her job is a nurse, right? She's a nurse. So let's review some more things very quickly. A person who writes for a newspaper is a journalist. A journalist. And if you have some clothes on, you wear that clothes. So you wear a uniform, you wear a suit, and so on. So that's all the time we have. Thank you for all the questions and comments. So the correct form is I go running instead of I go to run. Yes, very good, Livio. So I go running and not I go run. So if you do it for pleasure, you go running or you go shopping and so on. I always make this mistake, right? Well done. I make this mistake. So that's all the time we have. If you have any last minute questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you for your participation. I hope to see you guys soon at the school if the situation when the situation is different. And right, that's all for today. I hope you have a lovely afternoon. Okay, bye.